I had the opportunity a couple days ago to go and see the Odyssey with my little brother. I call him little, except he's 4 inches taller than I am and a kickboxing instructor. But we went to see the Odyssey, and I won't talk about very many details. I don't feel like I can spoil a movie for you where the script is more than 2,000 years old. If I've spoiled it for you at this point, I'm sorry. Snape kills Dumbledore. That there's one scene that's present both in the book, in Homer's Odyssey, and also in the movie that's always stood out to me, because I think as a society we've often misinterpreted it. That when we speak, when we make a cultural reference to sirens and the allure of the siren song, I think it's often used in a sexual connotation, that it's a form of seduction. But when we actually read the story and pay attention to how it is that the sirens tempt Odysseus, mindful of the fact that Odysseus is known for being a brilliant tactician, he's a genius. The man is set apart by his intellect. The tempting offer that they place before him is not sexual in nature. It's not lust at all, except in the broadest sense of the term. That they promise him knowledge. That in the original story, they tell Odysseus that we know all that took place in the siege of Troy, and we know all of the things that happen on the earth, which I'm pretty sure is a lie. I don't think the sirens were all knowing, but I mean, I guess if you're going to deceive somebody into dying against the rocks, go big or go home, right? But the sirens, they tempt him, they allure Odysseus with the promise of greater knowledge, which I always found interesting, because we often, when I was growing up as a kid, it was the expression from the Saturday morning cartoons, knowledge is power, or knowledge is half the battle. That knowledge is a powerful tool, and one that we are expected to be putting effort into growing and honing. But knowledge isn't always good. That sometimes knowledge for knowledge's sake can be dangerous. That's why, and it confused me as a kid because I was such a curious kid, but for a long time in the church, curiosity was actually a vice. Now, properly understood, that it was a vice in the same way that idle talk was a vice. That it was curiosity about things that at the end of the day don't matter. It wasn't curiosity about things that I need to know for my vocation, things that would make me better at my job, stuff that would make me more capable of loving God or my neighbor. It was curiosity about idle things, just wanting to collect knowledge for knowledge's sake. And I feel like for a little while, before internet connection speeds were quite what they are now, there was a certain virtue seen in being able to collect lots of random useless information. That being good at Jeopardy was considered an impressive display. Nowadays, now that everyone can be good at Jeopardy within 5 seconds just by asking their phone what the question is, I don't feel like it is considered as much of a virtue. It's not as impressive for us to know dates and places when they're all at our fingertips. But I think the warning of Odysseus is for us to not merely desire knowledge, but to desire knowledge that matters. Because there is so much to know in the world, and there's only so much time in which to spend learning it. That I suffer from a problem that afflicts many of my priest friends, and perhaps afflicts many of you as well, that I have an an ever-growing stack of books on my nightstand table that I always tell myself that I'm going to read, and I think by the time I die, there will be about 300 of them that are just unread there on the nightstand. That we only have so much time, so we should dedicate it to the good stuff. That I see curiosity as a vice if it's wasting my time on the stuff that doesn't matter, or the stuff that makes me a worse person. That in our first reading, we hear about King Solomon asking God for wisdom. Not merely knowledge, but the knowledge to be the king that he's called to be, and the ability to exercise and utilize that knowledge well. In our gospel, we hear about this man who finds a treasure in a field, who finds a pearl of great price and gives everything he has to buy it. That presumably he has knowledge the seller doesn't, unless the seller's a willing participant in this man's growing wealthy. That the man comes to know the things he needs to know for the sake of the kingdom. That the knowledge he possesses about this treasure or about this pearl is very important knowledge for this man. It's knowledge that makes him wealthy, even if it demands that he give everything for it. But knowledge can sometimes be a burden too. That's one of the things that I found fascinating in Christopher Nolan's take on the Odyssey. Whereas in the original, Odysseus, who has himself tied to the ship mast so he can listen to the siren song, so he can be the one man on planet Earth who's heard the call of the sirens and didn't die, that he strains against his restraints with the impression that he longs to jump in the water and go be with them and hear everything they want to tell him. In Christopher Nolan's version, he gives a slightly different take on it, that the sirens don't simply share with him knowledge of what happened, but knowledge of all the what-ifs. That the sirens play on his worst fears, it seems, and confront him and afflict him with all of the ways that he could have done things better, with knowledge of all of the futures that will never be, in which he might have saved his soldiers, in which he might have won the war without resorting to trickery and deceit, in which he might have been able to get home to his wife Penelope years earlier. And rather than tear at the restraints out of joy or a lust for knowledge, he tears at them almost in agony, that he cries, but he's crying tears of pain and suffering, not of joy and delight. That the impression is that Odysseus is trying to break free so that he can throw himself in the water and drown himself. That the sirens share knowledge with Odysseus, but they share the worst of it. They share knowledge that makes him a worse person, that moves his heart to its darkest emotions and impressions. And I think our news and the constant stream of information can do that to us too. That we have to take great care with all of the information at our fingertips to be able to filter through it and say, is this knowledge that's making me a better king? Is this knowledge that's helping me to love God and neighbor better, to be a better employer, husband, wife, employee, friend, neighbor? Or is this idle knowledge? Is this curiosity in the worst sense of the term? Am I just wasting time or filling precious space in my brain that needs to be filled with all sorts of other things? Or yet worse, is this knowledge of things like those sirens sang in the movie version of the Odyssey that's breaking my heart? Like, am I willingly inflicting bad news upon myself over and over and over again? Because the human heart was not meant to to handle as much bad news as most of us get on a daily basis. And if I sit there and I watch an hour and a half of YouTube political pundits or mainstream media, I am going to walk away from that a more discouraged and less godly man. Like, I will have sacrificed on the altar of the news some of the energy that I need to be able to make the world a better place. That's a sacrifice God does not want us to make. Yes, we ought to keep abreast of what's happening in our world, but we can do that in a way that doesn't lead us to great anger or apathy. You know, how often do I hear sins that flow from one variant or another of this in the confessional? People who confess being really angry at our politicians. And sometimes the piece of advice is very simple, and it's the one I gave right here. Turn off your television, please. The politicians will still be there, and they'll still be just as annoying as they were, but you don't need to know all of the ways in which they disagree with you, unless there's something you can do about it. Like, if you actually have a hand in our political system beyond your vote, then by all means, inflict it on yourself. Maybe that's a cross you have to carry for the rest of us. But not all of us need to know everything about what our politicians do. That at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, not only is this true, but is it helpful and is it making me more loving? People also lament that they just feel like they don't have purpose. They don't know what they're doing. They're discouraged. I think sometimes that comes from not focusing on the things in our lives that matter the most. That I think the more time we spend with God, with our children and spouses, the more opportunity we have to rediscover that purpose and to let that fire be rekindled in our hearts. Sometimes we also have more time to want to smack our head against a wall and ship them off to China. But we have a greater opportunity to remember what we're about and why God made us. That people also talk about how subtly the temptation of lust sneaks in for them. That they watch one video and there's nothing inappropriate, but the video they click on next in the column over here has slightly more scantily clad people and then slightly more scantily clad people, until all of a sudden they're watching things that are wildly inappropriate, but at no one step did they leap feet first into it. That they allowed the continuous procession of news to drag them bit by bit into the sin of lust. That I've seen the same thing happen just with idleness. And I see that with myself. Do I want to know what the 10 scariest scenes in movies ever were? Heck yeah, I do. And now at the end of that article, what about the 10 most brilliant moments of heroism in a movie ever? Absolutely. And now it's like an hour later and I don't know what happened. That we have to be really careful with that. Because knowledge can serve great good ends. But knowledge is also at times the tool that the sirens would love to use, either to distract and allure our hearts or to break our hearts, depending upon whether we're looking at the Odyssey as a book or the Odyssey as Christopher Nolan's movie. That in all of our lives, the siren song that you and I face is often not directly one of lust. It's one of innumerable forms of distraction. It's gossip, it's anger, it's a desperate desire to be in the know. God bless you. But our Lord Jesus himself has given us the knowledge we need for our salvation. And I have to constantly ask myself, if I pause my scrolling and I can't tell myself what the end goal of this current search is, what am I looking up and why, then I probably need to close out that tab on my phone. and rededicate that time to something more valuable. Because the treasure is out there buried in the field. The pearl of great price is out there waiting to be found. And if we so desire it, Jesus is here to give us everything we need to buy up that land and to grow wealthy in the things that matter. That there is so much out there and we can never read it or listen to it all. But by God's grace, may we be willing to listen to what He wants us to listen to, so that our hearts might be more peaceful, more joyful, and wealthy in the things that matter the most.